Hello and welcome once again. After 2 weeks off, it's James here with WSI, and my guest this week, he's not only a doctor, but by God, he's almost the greatest free throw shooter in basketball history if it wasn't for Kurt Hennig. Damn that man. Is of course Shawn Stasiak. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, James, thanks for having me on.
Dear me,
Appreciate
yeah, we've got through it finally. We've got through it finally. We were supposed to do this 2 weeks ago, weren't we? Or was it 2 weeks
it.
ago?
Yeah. 2 or 3 weeks ago, but some, life things happen, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, tell me about it. I've had to cancel so much stuff myself recently. So we've only got an hour. We're going to rush straight through this. And the first thing is, normally I do the plugs at the end, but I thought I'd throw straight away. You're sort of back in the wrestling universe. I hate to use the WWE terminology for it, because you've got a new YouTube channel, and you're going to make a bit of a run on YouTube, and tell us what it's all going to be about.
Yeah, so the YouTube channel is Shawn Stasiak's World for now. That may change, but it's Shawn Stasiak's World. And it's just, I've always been one that, like to document things and in high school, all the way dating to high school, just love capturing moments and experiences. And this channel will be very diverse. That's why I call it my world. It'll be, fitness and health related, maybe a little bit chiropractic, spiritual, deep philosophy, and entertainment, wrestling. I mean, it's really going to be, I wear a lot of different hats, so it's going to be culminate all those topics, that genre. So check it out. I love any love and help I can get now to get it started. We've been talking about this for a while, James. So yeah. I got my work cut out for me, but I've got faith that hopefully the content that I provide people will be engaged with.
Yeah, of course. And I know I've been throwing my sort of 2 cents in with everything. And also, I must point out before we start the interview proper, we were having a bit of a gun off, flexing biceps and everything. It's good you're a chiropractor. It's bad that you're 5,000 miles away from me, but it's good you're a chiropractor, because I've been just getting back onto the Jeff Cavaliere AthleanX.com workout that I paid for. I know you're a fitness guy. Do you know who Jeff Cavaliere is?
Yeah, I've seen him, a few times on YouTube, and I've heard the name. I don't really follow him, but yeah, there's so many fitness gurus out there today, right? But yeah, I think he's a pretty credible and known source, right? So I think he's probably got some pretty good information. He sounds pretty credible.
He gave me bad advice on my shoulder exercise, so I'm sending him the bill for your chiropractic services. Let me tell you. So I'll give you the first question, and because we're a bit tight for time, do you know what? I was going to skip this, but this is the one that I really personally want to know. Second generation star, of course, Stan the Man Stasiak. And were you? I'm going to further on draw parallels with The Rock as well, because you're second. He's obviously third generation, but Dad's a wrestler. Were you sort of an army brat style, moving from territory to territory with your father, or were you in one fixed location while he went and plied his trade?
Oh, no. I was yanked in and out of school districts my whole life. I was always an outsider, always, in fact, I was a victim of bullying. And because, of course, back in those days, in the 70s and early 80s, the cat wasn't out of the bag quite yet as far as pro wrestling. And people believed, what they saw on TV as to be, all the way real, the storylines, the characters, everything. So they didn't look at it as it's an act, it's characters being played or portrayed. My dad was a heel, and a lot of the time. So right here in Dallas, Texas, I remember being chased home from school because my dad, a bad guy, a heel, would feud with the Von Erichs, who were like gods around here, right? So I grew up and was exposed at a very early age, traveling up and down the highways and byways of life and the U.S. and Canada. And I experienced the territory days. So we traveled many times. In fact, I went to three different high schools my first year. So that just to kind of give you an idea of how much we moved around. And Portland, Oregon, Pacific Northwest, Don Owens territory. There were different territory. Dallas was the Von Erichs. You had the Gagnes up in Minnesota. Of course, the McMahons were the northeast part of the states. You had Crockett Promotions. You had Don Owens, like I said, in the Pacific Northwest. You had Roy Shires, I believe, was in San Francisco. So I traveled everywhere because of that, because being exposed to the business at such an early age, traveling with my father.
Tell me your favorite territory to just live in.
Probably Portland, just because
Really?
I just have, I've got bitter sweets with Portland because I lost both my parents there, and there were some hardships that I experienced there. But I have a lot of great memories there. Also Toronto, Canada, the Toronto area. I've got buddies of mine to this very day that are like my family. So I'd say, Pacific Northwest and Toronto for sure.
Obviously, I've got to ask this. Stan the Man Stasiak, former WWF champion. And, he was a big draw, as far as I can tell, in many different places. Yet his name never seems to come up when you talk about, the old guys in the territories and stuff like that. And it seems a bit of a shame to me because, he obviously did draw money and he had a lot of success in the business and as a former champion. With the WWF champion, he must have told you the story about when he was going to find out he was defeating Pedro Morales.
It's funny about that, James. I never knew the real story until after my dad had passed, and I had heard the tape that Bill Apter had recorded my dad, I believe, the night that he won it, or explained that, that was something different. I'm confusing that with something else. There was a dialogue showing my dad's dialogue and the agent going over what was going to happen that night, because my dad had wrestled Pedro many times, and the end result was that Pedro would hold on to the title, and it showed a dialogue there, and I'd never seen that before. I thought that was so interesting that my dad had no idea, going to the arena that night, had no idea that they were going to put the strap on him, and he become the 5th wrestler in the history of the WWE become champion. So I never learned I've learned a lot about my dad after he had passed, and I went to WWE and would, converse with Pat Patterson, Jack Lanza. These guys were agents for WWE, and they would share all kinds of stories about my father. My dad was, everyone loved him. He was a man's man. The boys would argue over him of who he was going to travel with to go to the next town, because they knew that if Stan Stasiak was in the car, the trip would go so much smoother because you'd have him laughing the whole way. My dad was a jokester, great storyteller. You would have loved my dad. He was just, everyone loved him.
Great sideburns as well.
And Neil Diamond, I think, and give him a run. But I will say my dad did have a mean streak, and he was a tough cookie, and he wasn't like a body guy. He liked to drink his beer, and he liked to brawl. And he would get his shirt off his back to anyone he loved, but he also didn't want to cross him the wrong way either.
He was, and I'm sure unbeknownst to most people watching this, in the Hall of Fame, but as a legacy candidate. I'm sure, obviously, I'm talking to the most biased person in the world, of course, but I mean, for all his accomplishments, I don't really think he should have been lumped in with so many others in just like a small video package. Were you consulted for him to go into the Hall of Fame?
That's a very, very bitter topic for me.
Oh, right.
And I try one who, I'm not one to try to be, I'm actually a speaker, and I don't just want to blow smoke up, wherever, just to say whatever to make people. I like to be real and have pertinence and substance to my insights and when I'm connecting with people on a speaking standpoint. But this is one of those things that it was just very, very wrong, the way that it was, they did this. And look, first of all, I'm grateful, and it's an honor to acknowledge him for what he had accomplished, or what he was a part of in that era. This is during a time that, the belt didn't change a whole lot. If you held the WWF championship, which is today the same company, the WWE championship, it really meant something, because it was very far and few between that belt would change hands. So there was quite a few good heels that they could have chosen from to make the transition from Pedro to get the belt onto Bruno. My dad being, and they're both baby faces, they didn't want them to match up, so they needed a good heel to make the my dad was considered a transitional champion. He only held the belt for 9 days, but as the story goes, he says, "Shawn, those were the happiest 9 days of my life, apart from me being born." He would always say that. And back in that day, it meant a lot to him, because again, they could have gone with a lot of other heels, but they chose my dad because he had such great heat. And as you know, a heel's boos in the arena is like the baby faces roaring cheers, right? And so anyway, fast forward years later, I had my experience with pro wrestling, and I got out of the business back in, when was it, 2002, pursued my chiropractic career. I've been serving my community here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the past, 15 plus years, and developed a speaking career along the way, which I'm going to the next level with. And I dabble with, and not to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm going to circle back to answer your question. I'm just giving you a picture of how this all kind of came about and how this affected me. I do also dabble in some of the entertainment projects that I have going on with my alter ego character Phobia, and you can check that out at the outdated website, which is going to be updated very soon. That's FOBIA-TV.com. But
Season Pro there, Season Pro.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, so I've got some big visions with that, and we can get into that maybe a little bit more down the road. But long story short, this is already a long story, is I had anticipated, being out of the business as long as I have. I felt that, what I've done since I've been out of the business has been nothing but positive, and giving back to my community and developing a speaking career and trying to, I help people with my hands and help change lives in a better way, both physically, mentally, spiritually, with the type of work and space that I'm involved with and have been for the past, since I've been out of wrestling. And I campaigned and promoted my father every year, a couple months prior to WrestleMania, because of the big Hall of Fame ceremony before the big show. And I also promoted the pitch, the idea that, there's never been a father-son duo to ever hold the WB title ever in history. And still to this very day, it hasn't been done. So I thought that, I feel like I'm staying in the best shape I can as I get older, and trying to keep, the chiropractic lifestyle, healthier lifestyle that I lead. And, I feel like my shelf life has been extended a little bit, and keeping some integrity there. And I thought, you just never know. I'm certainly not waiting by my phone, to ring but I'm always open for the right business. And, I just thought, though, I'm open to the right business, but again, it has to be the right business. It makes sense creatively and on a business standpoint to ever even consider going back to that in any way. But I still promoted my father getting inducted in the Hall of Fame. I felt that he was worthy of that. Even though he held the belt for only 9 days, he still was an original pioneer of that industry, in that company, the earlier stages. And always felt that when the time would come, when it was time, I had faith that eventually he would be, granted that, that acknowledgement. They would call upon me, his only son that I know of anyway, his only son, to take the honor and, share a couple stories. Thank you, good night. Never happened. I noticed that a few years, the past 5-6 years before they did what they did, they would show this legacy wing, or maybe it was a couple years. It was a couple years anyway, where they showed this legacy wing. And I was like, I get nervous. I go, oh man, don't tell me they wouldn't just throw my dad in that, would they? I feel like he would deserve an actual a real induction, and for a couple years that, would happen. And I was like, okay, good. We got another year. Maybe next year they'll induct him finally. You know what I mean? And I was kind of anticipating and expecting that call, but the call never came. And the way that I learned about my dad being inducted in the Hall of Fame, I had just finished a workout at LA Fitness. I was in the parking lot in my car. I looked down at my phone because it's blowing up on social media. And I have all these fans congratulating me. Congratulations, your dad's finally in. He deserves it. All this, all these comments and congratulations. And you'd think I'd be happy. You think you're right. I was the complete opposite. I knew right then and there what had happened, because the WrestleMania was like a couple days from that point. And the Hall of Fame was like a couple days or a day before. So I knew no one had called me. No one had informed me. I knew that they were going to just throw him in this wing. And I was like, oh man, and no disrespect to the other wrestlers that are in that wing, but I immediately called Vince McMahon, and he didn't pick up, of course. I didn't expect him to. He was busy with obviously WrestleMania and all the things that were going on. I texted him. I said, just please don't do it right, man. Can you just grant it next year when they're in the New York area? The following year they were like I think it was MetLife Stadium or one of those big stadiums, because he was a big hit wherever he went. But I felt that would be more appropriate geographically to have him inducted there. And He texted me back and said, don't take it personal. It's just a company decision. I was so hurt by that, because not only was I not informed, I wasn't invited to even come out to the arena just to show my respects for all the other legends, you know. It was just a really raw deal, man. And it really put a bitter taste in my mouth. And I don't hold on to it, you know. I've released it and let it go, but it is compartmentalized and is definitely something that, if, you know, I can pull from, if I ever had to bring some real content to the table, so to speak. You talk about being full of piss and vinegar. That's something that would light me up very easily. So it is what it is, man, you know, but it just goes to show, to me, it was so disrespectful. And I was I was depressed for a couple of weeks. Like, it really caused me some despair and grief, because I anticipated this for a long time and I thought they would do the right thing. And I don't need Mr. T time where I'm up there for an hour, you know, just give me 5 minutes. Let me tell 2 funny stories. You know, I'm taking this acknowledgement and award, you know, for my dad. God bless, good night. But it never came. So I must be so disregarded or not liked, or on some shit list, I guess, that, you know, I wasn't even, I guess, worthy in their minds to be able to join that evening to show my respects for that ceremony, much less, you know, not even inform me of anything at all. So it was a raw deal.
Before we move on, I'll just add this, is that generally with the legacy inductees, they're generally the people who meant more to wrestling as a whole industry, you know, encompassing the 100+ years of wrestling, than the people who actually get the talking time. So if you look at it that way, then it's an honor. But I you know, I mean, you won't, I know. But anyway, I shall move on. And first thing is, you go to Power Pro Wrestling. I wanted to ask you about Stacey Carter and working with Jerry Lawler and all that kind of thing, but I'm not going to, because if we ever do a second part, I will, and we'll, you know, do the full omnibus edition of this podcast. So we'll move straight to the WWF then. And you worked with Vince Russo in the WWF, straight under him. He was writing for you. He created, I imagine, the character for you, and also he brought you into WCW as well. What are your opinions of Vince Russo, at least in the WWF side? Because yes, he gave you a character, he gave you TV time and everything like that, but you know, it could have it could have been a more money gimmick. Let's say, like, I'll probably bring in The Rock here, because you and The Rock have like so many parallels. You know, at least multi-generation. Let's say, great looking guys, all the upside in the world, and you were brought in as a meat.
Well, I was disappointed when I found that out, because I had anticipated most of my life that I was going to take after my father, and, you know, all the training, all the workouts, even the amateur wrestling career. I have a very extensive amateur career, you know, but I was always, you know, in my mind working towards, you know, trying out professional wrestling, just all those years. And of course, training for pro wrestling. And I just thought that, with my father, you know, having such a legacy name and such deep rooted history with that company, being one of their original champions, I mean, I thought that I would just, you know, go by Shawn Stasiak, take after his name, but have a twist to Shawn Stasiak. I mean, you know, it might sound boring, just Shawn Stasiak. Shawn Stasiak would have been a, you know, world-class athlete, full of piss and vinegar, there to kick ass and with an attitude and be very entertaining all in one, very dynamic, you know, character that I had in mind. But when they presented that to me, yeah, I was disappointed. But at the same time, I understood that the company was going in a direction, different business model. They're heading into what we know as the Attitude Era. And, you know, a couple of the veterans, they knew that I was a little disappointed about it. But they said, Shawn, just take the role. It's like being an actor or an actress, and you're just taking a role in a movie or a TV show. Is essentially what it was. It won't last forever. Get your feet wet, learn the business, hone your craft, get you experience. You're out on TV, or, you know, although I didn't get much promo opportunity during that time, you know, really that didn't come till really WCW when I had that opportunity. But yeah, I was disappointed, but at the same time, I was very, very excited that I was finally there and had arrived, and my foot was in the door, so to speak. So it was bittersweet for me, honestly.
So let's say Ryan Shamrock, as she was known, Alicia Webb, Terry Runnels, Jackie. Who was your favorite out of the three? You must have a story about some of them. Did you hang out with them afterwards or whatnot?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, but I always had a relationship with all the girls that I worked with, just for the record. I didn't want to mix personal with business, you know. But yeah, I mean, they're all great. Those girls, you know, they all different, you know, they're all different individuals, different personalities. I think I clicked with Terry probably the most, just because her personality, you know, she's fun, loving, and just, you know, she's just fun to be around, you know. And you know, and she also had been in the business longer than I had been, like actually had her feet wet in that business, you know, marrying into the business and then having her experience. So I actually learned some from Terry, you know, just little things, behind the scenes stuff, just little tips and things that make a difference. The littlest things make a big difference, right? The way you look at the camera, the way your body's positioned, just different things that she knew that would reinforce what I felt that I knew. But I learned, and, you know, from not just her, but of course, other wrestlers and veterans that were there. But I was so green, you know, when I came aboard, I had not had that much training, maybe a year and a half of training, maybe 2 years.
Yeah, you were with Dory Funk, weren't you?
Well, that was, I was brought in, I had a tryout with WWE. Of course, my alter ego character Phobia is what initially got my tryout with the company. But we never used that as a wrestling character. It never has been used under like a wrestling persona. It's actually now, and thank God for that. I'm doing something so much bigger and diverse with it. But it got my foot in the door as far as a tryout. So when I had my tryout, you know, I remember showing up to Stanford in 1997. It was shortly after my dad had passed. And that's where I met Tom Pritchard, and Tom and I spent a weekend. He was just feeling me out, you know, getting in the ring and just going over some basic stuff. And of course, my very first experience was Yokozuna, was Rodney was there, because he had been out for a while. I don't know if he had an injury, or maybe they were trying to get him to bring his weight down a little bit. So they sent him to the warehouse in Stanford to just kind of work off some rust sort of thing. And I hung out with Rodney for a couple of days, and that was my very first memories of WWE. And it was a very fun, great experience with him. He said, "Man, your dad used to scare the crap out of me when I was a kid," because of course he comes from the Samoan dynasty, that family. So there's that, you know, that I guess that kind of was a bond, and a kind of brought us together a little. You know, I bonded with him right away. He was just a really good guy, and I got to hang out with Rodney for a couple of days. Very funny guy too. I remember him dropping a leg on me, and I was petrified. We're just training, you know, and just going over some moves, and it just barely touched me. You know, he was so light for a 600-pound plus guy, you know. But they called me back after my tryout a couple months later to say, "Hey, we want to train you full time." And that's when I packed all my stuff up in Boise, Idaho, and moved, because that's where I went to, you know, college, university, and moved my life, you know, to Stamford, Connecticut, where they put me up there, and had to rent a car, and I had a little weekly, you know, developmental contract, which I was being paid basically to, you know, it wasn't break the bank money, but I'm being paid to train for my, you know, lifelong dream to be a WWE superstar. And that's when the camp started in the warehouse, where Dory Funk Jr. came in, and Tom Pritchard, of course, assisted with that. So I was essentially trained by Dory Funk Jr. and Tom Pritchard. And of course, those camps were great. Every month they'd fly, you know, periodically some guys would come in just to have a 1 or 2 day little look at, try out. And then we'd have these full blown camps that would go a week, you know, where we you know, it was tough, man. It was rough. But it was so structured, where you get up in the morning, you have breakfast, you go to the gym, all there in Stanford at the headquarters, work out in the gym, have another bite to eat, and then now to the ring. And we must have taken 200 bumps a day. Just Dory would have us doing all kinds of, you know, just hip tosses, you know, just back drops, back bumps, turnbuckles. I mean, you were black and blue and beat up the time that camp was over. But by the end of the camp, then we'd have spot shows where we would go to a show like on a Saturday, or maybe it was a Friday night too. Friday and Saturday have these shows where we do spot shows and, you know, practice it out. But that's where I met the likes of, you know, Edge, Christian, Test, you know, rest his soul. Matt Bloom, Prince Albert. There's the Giant Silva. I met Mark Merrill there, Ahmed Johnson, Earthquake. Al Snow came through there. Crash Holly. I mean, there's just, Darren Drozdov, was there. One of my very first talents that I met there, because he lived there and kind of took me in and showed me around. And, God bless Darren. It's so unfortunate about what had happened with him, but he was just a really, really good soul, really good guy, great athlete too. But yeah, just it was a great experience, man. It was like a fast track to professional wrestling training, because I had been around the business, grew up around it. My dad had retired in 1984, but I still watched it, on the weekends with my buddies, and we're always emulating wrestling characters, and we're so inspired by these larger than life characters. So it just kind of kept my inspiration to want to, take after my dad and give that a try sometime. And that didn't come until after I finished college. I didn't actually get started with my training until really towards my late 20s, mid to late 20s.
Well, you probably did the right thing there. Get your education first, and then pursue because there's always something to fall back on. Right, I shall move on. A couple more WWF questions, but first I'm going to give you the personality test. It's not a personality test, but I never remember to give it another name that's more suitable.
James?
Sorry, Shawn, say it again.
Multiple personalities. Let's go.
Well, the one I'm talking to now, you give me the answers as that personality. So I'm going to give you. I actually scrubbed this one out. First time you saw Ric Flair naked, not in a locker room.
I don't think I've ever seen Rick naked, and thank God for that. I've heard stories, though.
Last man standing at the bar.
Haku.
Oh, really? I didn't know he was a heavy drinker.
Who says he's got a drink?
Oh, he's just hanging out looking for a fight then, maybe.
We're just hanging out, having a Diet Dr. Pepper, just like Dr. Shawn. You need to make a drink that says Dr. Shawn, Diet Dr. Shawn. What do you think?
You're so after sponsorship from Dr. Pepper. I know you are, man.
I'm telling you, man.
I'll give you the next one. Hottest Nitro girl. And why is it Shay?
Shay? Is that specifically, as you're asking me?
That's my answer. But who would your answer be?
Which one was my favorite Nitro girls?
Yes.
Is the question? Well, I got to say, Stacy Keibler, who became my valet.
Of course, I will be asking about that in a minute as well. Smelliest wrestler.
Geez, that's a tough one. There's quite a few of them. I would have to say probably. I just don't know. I can't think of them. There's so many of them. I don't know.
Say Vader. Everyone else said Vader. I know you never wrestled Vader, but
who?
Vader. Vader. Everyone seems to sort of mention, or Balls Mahoney, and I know you didn't wrestle either.
I was going to say Glenn Jacobs, Kane, because he wore the mask all the time, but I imagine he washed it, Same with Mankind and someone, maybe Doink the Clown. I don't know. You'd think they'd wash their gear, but apparently not. Actually, that rings a bell. It was somebody actually that I worked with that was a local. Basically, there is a more or less, an enhancement talent. I remember someone in a town that I wrestled that was an enhancement talent. I can't remember their name, but they didn't smell too good.
Oh, okay then. Biggest bully.
Well, I guess the name that comes up would be Bradshaw, right? You hear that from most people, but I didn't really. I could see how he could be taken as a bully. I didn't take him that way because I don't know. I could see how he could be seen as a bully. So maybe some bullying tactics that he might have had, but I never felt that I was bullied because I can't stand bullies, and I wouldn't, I'd stand up to that. You know what I mean? So I would say he's probably the most perceived bully that I can think of in my time.
Biggest ladies' man.
Probably Ric Flair.
Of course. God, I haven't got my glasses on. Sort of miserable. Most talented wrestler you ever worked with.
There's quite a few of them. It's kind of a context answer. I want, and this kind of leads me to a little bit of a story. From my experience, of course, probably Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. But I remember one of my greatest matches. People say, "What's your best match that really stands out to you?" And I got to say, Chris Jericho. And I say that because we had a couple house shows in New York, and I remember he was so over. And I was, I think fans wanted to get behind me, whether they booed me or wanted to, cheer me. But I think they were just trying to find a reason. And of course, that was the struggle with the company, is to find something that was pertinent and a storyline and a character that would, be strong and people would invest emotionally in, right? But I was still sort of, I think, in a developmental stage. But I remember making my way out to the ring, and I had the deepest boos that I had ever really experienced. And I was like, wow, this is great, And then when Jericho came out, the roof blew off, man. And everything that he did, they were so loud and cheered. Anything I did, they booed. And so the time that we wrapped it up and I'm in the walls of Jericho, I got to say, by the way, that move, don't ever get in that move. That thing can snap your back. Anyway, it was just so deafening loud that from any other experience that I remember. And that to me really stands out because it was just the art and the story that was told. In fact, when I got backstage, the biggest compliments were your peers like Undertaker and Steven Regal came up to me and said, they shook my hand and said, you guys put on a hell of a show tonight and really good job. That's one of the biggest, best compliment you can get is from your peers, especially from guys of that status, that are so highly regarded in the business. And I knew I had done something right because I got a raise on my contract the next week too. So, it was just, I have to say that was my most memorable match because I barely did anything and he hardly did anything, but it's because of what we did when we did it, the timing, our cadence, like everything was just it flowed so well that it just created this, it was magic. It truly was. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, okay, this is what they talk about. When you're over and you're really on, it was magic. It was an amazing feeling. So I had to say my two best matches, and I have to tip my hat to Chris. He led the match at the time. He was much more experienced than I was, at the time. And I'd say that he's that's a sign of being a really good talent.
Is this a first WWF run or second? So Invasion, Planet Stasiak. Was it that area?
Second. Yeah, the second tenure.
Okay, I'll give you a couple of proper quick fire ones. I am very conscious of the time. Best and worst road agents?
Oh, man. I feel stumped on some of these questions. I'm just trying to think. Best and worst. I mean, every agent that I had, they did what they were supposed to do. They did the best job they could. I really don't have an answer for that, who was best or worst. I mean, I would say I like Jack Lanza. My dad and him were good friends, and he'd always tell me stories about my dad. So I kind of felt this closeness. I had lost my father. So I think maybe subconsciously I was looking at him almost kind of like a father figure. And he reminded me of my dad from what I remembered, just his demeanor and just the era he comes from. So I'd say he's probably my favorite, agent. Pat Patterson was fun to be around too, a very creative guy. I can't think of worse though, honestly. I just, no one really comes to mind.
Right, so no one will ever find you then for being late or anything. I'll give you this last one, most memorable backstage fight.
Hold on, I take that back then. You said fine.
Yeah.
Johnny Laurinaitis, WCW.
How much and what for?
Being late. And I got to tell you a story. I remember I was with Mike Awesome. We were traveling together and we're like, we got to get to it was like a $500 or $1,000 fine or something. And so he's like whipping around the building, trying to find parking. And I said, well, let's just grab the security guy to wave us in. And he said, no, let's park it right here. And we literally parked the car about half a block away from the arena, grabbed our bags and started running to the arena. My phone comes flying out. I said, I got to get my phone. It slid under a car. I'm sitting there reaching under the car. I'm trying to get my bag, everything assembled and kept running and finally made it in there and barely made it and checked in and didn't get fined. But that was the kind of pressure you felt with Johnny as the agent who implemented this apparently. So I had been fined a couple of times, but that day or that night I didn't get fined. I made it.
Well, he gained popularity once he got into the VP, WWE VP, I believe. One last one, the most memorable backstage fight.
I don't recall a backstage fight that I ever witnessed. I've heard about a few, but I don't recall seeing one.
I'm going to ask you one more question before we go to WCW, and it's actually the thing that we got in touch about, because you got in touch with me. I was interviewing Dr. Tom, and I spread a rumor that has been perpetuated throughout the years. I am assuming you've been asked this before, because you've done a couple of interviews, haven't you, recently? Did they ask you about this? Sorry, then you can give me the short story of it, and I will give you... I'll tell you what, I'll give you the Wrestling Observer report, and you just tell me where they're wrong, and we'll move on to WCW. So... Wrestling Observer report, Shawn Stasiak, Shawn Stipich, they spelt your both names wrong, was fired at the December the 6th tapings in Worcester, Massachusetts by Jim Ross in front of everybody. Apparently Stasiak had secretly kept a tape recorder in his bag and would tape while he was gone to hear what people were saying behind his back, and was also allegedly tape recording locker room and road conversations and had gotten caught. What's the real story?
Yeah, wow. That's a story that's followed me around. My name will forever be synonymous with that tape recorder incident. I just embrace it now. And I've said this in the last few interviews that I've done. It's amazing how information gets out there and it gets completely blown out of proportion or so fabricated, or there's 20 different versions, right? Well, and that's funny. You must be reading my mind, because I was just thinking about that. I wonder when that question's coming up, because that's how you and I met. I commented on the Dr. Tom interview. And I said, hey, if you want the real story, James, let me know. I was there. Stupid mistake. I was young. It was just a stupid thing to do looking back. I mean, I've realized this when it happened 22 years ago. My dad bought my first tape recorder when I was a kid. I was always clowning around, imitating, doing impersonations. I was always just again, I like to document, which is, audio, video. I love to capture moments and look back on and create memories, And so I had a tape recorder in my bag. And of course, this was always advised or suggested by, I think, Dr. Tom, and I think Dory Funk Jr. for sure. Remember, as part of our training, hey, you're on the road a lot. You travel all the time. You spend hours upon hours in a car going from one town to the next. Get a tape recorder and work on your craft, work on your promos, work on your character, work on your interview skills, right? So that's why I had the damn thing in the first place. And back then were the days of cassette tapes, those big, like the Walkmans with the big cassette. As I had like a bunch of those in my bag that had there were music tapes, right? But so to really speed this up and Reader's Digest this thing, because I've talked about this 1,000 times. I just was playing a joke. It was a rib that I was attempting to play on a couple wrestlers that I was traveling with, Davey Boy Smith and Steve Blackman. And we were in Quebec, Canada. And of course, everything's French there. And, after about 3-4 days cooped up in a car, traveling from town to town, and making that loop, you're tired by the end of it, And so they were just bickering and fun, ribbing each other or whatever. And so I thought, I'll play a joke on it. I'm going to record them on when they start bitching and complaining, and then play it back for them. Say, hey, this is how you guys sounded today, or this whole trip. I can't, it was just a rip that I was going to play it back. And I want to make this real clear, because this is so stupid. I get it's amazing. These keyboard warriors get on there and they want to crucify me to this very day. It's like, oh, that was illegal. He should have gone to jail for that. What was he secretly taping? And oh my God, I was working for Hard Copy. I was working for WCW at the time. I was going to use it to blackmail. Look, if there was anything that those guys talked about that was serious or something that was real, I wouldn't have recorded, man. It was all goofy stuff that they were engaging in that I was just documenting to play back for them just as a joke. Stupid thing to do, right? But I thought it was going to be a fun rib to pull at the time. But essentially, it's what got me fired, man, and from my dream job. And it caused me a lot of despair, a lot of grief. But basically, had it out during the end of the trip, and I was recording. It was Steve Blackman, and I said, hey, Steve, what do you think of the Montreal airport? I had it out and I put it up to his face like I was a reporter, and he said, and he looked at me funny and he said, you weren't he didn't feel comfortable. I could tell. So I turned it off. He said, you weren't recording with that in the car or anything or any other time. This is where I went wrong. I lied. I said, no, because I knew at that instant moment, I had a decision to make. Shawn, these guys don't really know you. You know, they don't know the fun-loving Shawn. If they grew up around you or knew who you were, they would know everything's fine, you know, but I went wrong. I lied. I knew at that point the rib is dead. I'll just record over it. There's no sense in, you know, there's no use for it now. So I said, no problem. Put it in my bag. End of story. Next day we're at TVs. I go to the locker room, put my bag in the locker room. I'm out to the ring, going over my match, getting ready for the show. Someone comes out and grabs me, says, Shawn, you got to come back, man. This is not good. It doesn't look good. You're in trouble, man. I'm like, what? I didn't have a clue what it could be about. Had the whole locker room there staring at me, you know, with my bag out. I had my clothes torn, all the cassette tapes all scattered all over the floor, busted tapes in the garbage can. I mean, it was just a really, really bad look for me, you know, because I had said I wasn't recording, but your voice is on the damn thing. When you think that if I was trying to secretly tape anybody, why would I leave my bag so available for anybody just to come by and grab? I mean, in my heart and mind, there's no use for it. It didn't even dawn on me. But when you talk about wrong place, wrong time, that's exactly what happened in that case. And it just made me, it was a really bad look for me. And so and I understand that, like, now knowing, and I was going to give you the Reader's Digest version. Geez. Now that I look back on it, though, if that were to happen today, and of course, things are much more revealed, and you have social media and people are recording everything now. But I understand. I'd have a problem with it too. I'd say, who's this guy? What's he doing? I don't trust to be around this guy. I don't want to talk around. I mean, I understand. It was just a really stupid thing to do. Honest to God, truth. Never meant any harm whatsoever, but it got me fired. No, I wasn't paranoid to the point that I got to record the boys in a locker room to see what they might be saying. What are they saying about me? I'm so paranoid. I'm going to, have a tape. Come on, man. That's what I just share with you is the honest to God truth. That's what happened and caused me a lot of grief, man. I don't think I ever truly recovered from that with WWE. I think that they somehow, some way, it was always used against me somehow. And that might've been maybe a part of the reason, or a big reason, why I didn't feel like I could ever get anything behind me in that company, as far as a push, as far as a real, just some love and support, I guess.
When I think of ribs and sense of humor in the wrestling world, I think of Steve Blackman. It might have been I think it might have been Steve Blackman that might have been the wrong target for that, I suppose.
I don't think it mattered who it was. It was just a stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
And I see what you're saying with giving his reputation, but I'm not intimidated by that or felt intimidated by any of that. In fact, I like Steve because he's one of the first people that I met when I had my WWE experience. They brought him in as one of those tryout to take a look at kind of thing. And I was there to work with him and, try to help him as best I could to get hired with WWE. So I liked him. He had dry sense of humor, but he's actually a funny guy. And I've talked to Steve since then. I think Steve's a good guy, man, for sure.
Yeah, I apologize to you as well. So I went, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I felt so bad afterwards because it sort of like perpetuates. Because I forget that people watch these things. Like, because we're just having a chat, and then I post it and then numbers happen. And then, but anyway, we shall move on because obviously, as I say, time is tight. We've got about 15 minutes left. So what I'll probably end up doing if we ever get talking again, let me have a look at the questions, the reams of questions I've got for you. And the other thing I did ask was the other thing you're always asked about is WrestleMania 17. But I'm not going to ask you about that. I'm going to ask you about, do you remember the story about Shawn O'Haire and why he was late to the show?
Oh, you mean that night for WrestleMania 17?
Yes, I do.
Put him. I have no idea. He was in the box with us that they put us in, right?
Yeah. Well, I won't tell you the story then because it's a long story.
Yeah, I apparently though I'm the one that caused the debacle with that whole storyline because of my interview leak.
but you're not though, right? So do you know who else leaked that? It was Chaz Warrington, Mosh, because they were asking for the website. Who do you think is going to win, Steve Austin or The Rock? And Chaz went, I think it's going to be Steve Austin because The Rock's got a movie coming up that he's got to be filming in a couple of weeks.
Well, that almost sounds even more of some kind of giveaway, you know? I mean, look, back then, we didn't have, I think we had flip phones then. I think we had cell phones, but look, man, I've told this story and I will Reader's Digest this one.
Do you know what, right? Because I know you've been asked about it before and I don't want to repeat the content. So I'll tell you what, we will move on to something completely fresh, hopefully, and completely fairly new, at least.
Thing to not do interviews at all. I mean, no one said anything. There was no storyline, no angle. There was nothing. I just simply thought I was doing the company and myself and WWE and WrestleMania a good deed by talking about being there. That's it. And apparently that was a big no-no. No one ever said anything. And I almost got fired in the hotel room before I could even make it to the arena, to the WrestleMania, the Astrodome. And I had from a company that I had been fired from already. I almost got fired again before I even showed up to the arena. I can't get nothing right with this company, man.
Well, we'll leave that for now. As I say, I've got so much stuff about WCW, your second WWE run and everything, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask you about some modern wrestling. How do you feel about it? I hear you're a big fan of Adam Cole.
Where did you hear that at?
When we were talking a couple of days ago.
Okay. You know, I don't want to say the wrong things, meaning like, it's just, I guess I grew up in a different era and I understand that wrestling evolves and things change and you can't have the same body types. And, you know, if everyone was built the same, it'd be boring. You got to have giants and midgets and bodies, you know, good built bodies, and you got to have fat people and skinny people. And, you know, you got to have a mixture of things, and I know it's not a bodybuilding contest and, you know, but I don't know. It's just, I try to suspend my disbelief just like I would go into a movie. And I really want to be captivated by what I see on the screen when I'm watching some of these guys today. And I guess he's so over, which is awesome. Good for him. He might be the greatest guy in the world. I don't know him. And I've watched some of his work and he seems, you know, I mean, it seems decent, you know. I guess just physically though, I'm distracted by it so much that maybe I'm like, what am I missing here? I don't really quite understand the connection with the crowd. Like, he is over. I mean, when he does that Adam Cole, baby, I mean, it's loud in there, man. That's awesome. He's doing something right in today's era and today's generation of fans. So God bless him and good for him. But I don't know. I need to watch him more to try to understand. I watched him last night, and I don't know what the appeal is, but maybe you can tell me. I don't know.
I know you watch wrestling and everything, and you're the same as me. You're a big Jim Cornette fan. I'm a big Jim Cornette fan. I believe we both sort of subscribe more to Jim's point of view than maybe, let's say, Tony Khan's. Just to pluck a name out of the air for someone who's you know, very involved in the modern wrestling. With WWE, with AEW, what you've seen, what do you like about them, both companies, and what would you prefer go back to sort of a bygone era?
Yeah, Jim is definitely a polarizing figure, isn't he? You either love him or hate him. I think personally, I can see why he's got a lot of heat, but I agree with a lot of things he says, man. It just makes sense to me about psychology and storylines and what he would do. He always gives examples. To me, it's like, that's a source that if you want to, and of course people might disagree and say, well, it's past his time. He doesn't get today's wrestling. And I get that. It's a different era. It's a different generation. Just like, you know, with the Adam Cole thing, the Daniel Bryans, I mean, these are smaller guys, but I get Daniel Bryan. I get that. But, and I get CM Punk now. I didn't at first, but I get him now because he's so real, so authentic, organic, that connection with the crowd. I like the realism of pro wrestling. And I think that's the magic of pro wrestling, is when you can take reality parallels and you can intertwine that with the fiction and the work. And then the smart marks, or you're at home going, I know this is pro wrestling and it's set, it's choreographed, but I think there's some real emotion here. And then you question things when you start blurring the lines. I love that. To me, that's great TV. That's magic. And I think Jim's funny. I can see why he ruffles some feathers. I don't agree with everything he says. Some of his political comments, I'm no comment. But anyway, point being is, I think he's a wealth of knowledge, and I think even his ideology and his beliefs of how wrestling should be portrayed, I agree with. And I think that today's product could learn a lot from him. Just listening to that podcast, they could get a lot of ideas where, I mean, I know if I was wrestling right now, I'd be listening to that podcast every time to see what he does say about my matches and critiques me and gives examples and what I would have done. And it makes you think, I mean, for the next time, or you just pick up things, this is just, it's just, to me, it's great knowledge. Others will say he's stuck in the 80s or whatever, and it's not going to work in today's wrestling, but I disagree with that. There's this basic psychology. There's a reason why you do things when you do them to make sense. I think he's a wealth of knowledge, but I don't really, I watch both shows. I record them. I go through my DVR, and I stop it when I see Randy Orton. I want to see what they're doing with Randy. Brock, whenever Brock's out, I have the utmost respect for Brock, and I love realism. I like Bobby Lashley too. I mean, these guys are just, I guess they're larger than life. They're real athletes. It's what I'm attracted to, I guess. I'm just curious to see what they do with these guys, but it's difficult for me to get through a full show a lot of times. With AEW, I'm excited for them. I think it's great that there's they say it's not competition, but a wrestling fan can only spend so much money on pay-per-views and merchandise or whatever. So in essence, is it competition? Yes and no. I think that, it's definitely growing. They've got a lot of talent. Seems like every other week there's a new talent coming aboard. I think they have to be careful of not being spread too thin. I think they have enough talent to work on and focus on and try to develop and get over. I do see a lot of mistakes and things that they make. Even like I said, I agree with some of the things that Cornette says, but I'm just excited, man. I'm really excited for the pro wrestling business, and I'm pulling for them. I hope that they have all the success in the world, because that's great for the boys or the girls too, the talent. It's good for the wrestling fan. That's who wins the most, right? As a wrestling fan, and it's just good for business overall. So between the two products, I don't watch WWE so much. I will tune into NXT only, and I'm giving a shout out to Teresa, Zoe Stark. She's like a sister to me. Her and Tom Howard. Tom's her, other half, and I love them both, and so I'm always pulling for her. I'll watch her segment, but it's hard for me to get through that show too, man. Honestly, so. That's my take on today's product. I'm looking to be captivated, and I want to feel moved. When the CM Punk debut happened a few weeks ago, I was so moved by that, just because of the authenticity, the crowd reaction, the organicness, just the realism, man. It was emotional because it was, I don't know, it just had such a realism to it that was just awesome, man. And, the stars were aligned, right? They could not have done that any different, Chicago, 7 years away. It was just awesome to see. I was just a happy, those moments are very far and few between. That's why we all got into this business, so we could create and be part of those moments.
Exactly. I'll ask you one very brief wrestling question, then I will throw to you for plugs and what have you been doing since wrestling, of course. I think when we're going into modern wrestling, so many of the old smart marks, to coin it's not coining a phrase, it's already a phrase that's out there, will say that Goldberg was terrible. And I say Goldberg, the Bret Hart kick withstanding, Goldberg was awesome. He drew money like almost nobody else. He was as real as it got. I mean, where's your opinion on, let's say, Goldberg, for somebody who can really, someone who's just missing in today's product?
Well, he got started at a time that was, look, the stars have to be aligned. Look, you can be the greatest talent, have a great look, have charisma, have great skills, and you can even have a legacy name. You can have all these tools, accolades, and all these elements to be as the ingredients for an award-winning stew, so to speak, right? But if you don't have the right chef or the right person to put this all together, and in this case, the person with the power of the pen, they're going nowhere. So I think was in the case of someone like Goldberg, had a great look, He was a real athlete. He had a intensity and a believability about him. And I think Bill, Bill is no pushover in real life. I think, and he had a lot of help along the way. He was green. That's why they protected him by keeping his matches short, quick, but explosive. I think, more characters like that. I love that. I love that element of a character. So I think that when Goldberg has come back the last, handful of years, he's made these appearances at these big, WrestleMania, these pay-per-views overseas. There's an element to him that I just don't see in today's wrestling product. It's and I love Roman Reigns, for instance. I'm Drew McIntyre, big, good-looking dudes with charisma and a look and a cadence.
They look like badasses. They look like badasses, and so few people do.
They could be casted in a movie. I'm looking at these guys going, man, I can't see how a Hollywood director would look at these guys and think, man, they can definitely play some of those, like some of those. I don't know. Help me out here. What are some of those movies?
James Bond villain, let's say.
I'm talking like Gladiators and stuff like that. I see Drew McIntyre, and same with Roman. Even Sheamus, as pale as he is, I like Sheamus, but he, they just, I'm referring to some, I guess, larger than life characters. And look, I just grew up in that era where, again, you don't have to be the biggest guy in the world, but Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, those guys weren't the biggest guys, but they had a believability about them that just still drew me in, that it was believable. I'm not saying, look, I think the cruiserweight division and a division for smaller statured people, it should be just as prestigious as a heavyweight. Like in boxing, you got Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor. These are guys that are smaller guys, but it's very prestigious. Why not? I think that division is, something appropriate for those types of builds and statures. It's just hard to believe that, that they're heavyweight world champions. And I know, again, people say, come on, Shawn, it's pro wrestling. It's like a movie. It's a script. I get it. But I think it's lost fans over the years on, it's just like, this is nonsense. I don't know.
I pretty much definitely agree with you. We've only got a couple of minutes left because you've booked the studio time and everything. So you left wrestling in 2002. Give us a very potted history of and plugs as well of what you did after you left with the chiropractic and speaking, and what you're doing now with the YouTube channel.
Yeah, so I became a chiropractor 15 years ago, and I've developed a speaking career along the way that has different layers to it, different tiers, and so I'm going to the next tier. I guess I'd be considered like a thought leader, wellness life coach, voice. I don't like that word motivational speaker. It's so
Tony Robbins.
I guess my own version of Tony Robbins, a hybrid version, right? Because the fitness life has been the culprit of everything that I've done in my life. Was become a professional wrestler, an amateur wrestler, the phobia character. Anything I've ever done has revolved around that life. So my speaking, my wellness programs, all these things there's a physical component to it, because you got to keep the vehicle strong and you got to keep it healthy. The engine can look, you have a shiny car, but a rusty engine. You got to make sure everything is healthy and you're doing the right things. But I still have aspirations and, visions of getting involved maybe with a little bit of acting or with my phobia character. I'm putting something together cinematically. The message of the character is, face your fears and own your life. Too many times we're shackled by fear. We create these self-limiting beliefs, and especially with our world and climate today with COVID and, this global pandemic that we've experienced. And a lot of things have changed. Our world's a very different place than it was almost 2 years ago. So people have had to, start all over again, losing jobs, start careers over, going back to the drawing boards, a lot of fear and anxiety because there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of changes, So my character is basically, it's a theatrical version of me. And again, like I said, it got me my tryout for WWE, but we never used it as a wrestling character. The closest thing that it got to that really was when Hulk Hogan was with TNA. and Hulk and I had stayed in touch over the years. And there was a time where, I think it was in 2010, 2011, he was interested in that character and bringing that aboard to be one of Sting's nemesis. And I was like, whoa, I'm in, I mean, that's one of my teenage idols, Sting. That's, I guess it was an influence there with my phobia character from a younger Sting, Surfer Sting character. But it never came to fruition. At the time, I was very, very disappointed. I was like, man, how come that didn't I couldn't understand. Why did that come to fruition? Because just for one thing or another, politically, who knows? It just fell through. It never happened. And, but I'm so grateful that it didn't, because it probably would have just gotten washed up as another face painted character. And now I get to use it for something so much bigger. And I've been doing things with it, working with kids in schools, anti-bullying. Now I want to take it to a cinematic level where, the message is, it's entertainment. You'll be entertained, but I want people to walk out of a theater with goosebumps and just thinking, man, I'm ready to take on my life, or that challenge, whether it's relationships, whether it's a career, whether it's your health, whatever you're challenged with, because you've been living in fear and shackling yourself, imprisoning yourself in fear. Let this character expression, this message, this film, this TV show, let that message inspire you to make that light bulb go off, to help you break through and become the best version that you can be. So that's, I'm a speaker, and I'd say in the next couple of years, I'll be doing that full speed. But I see myself uniquely bringing out the phobia character in a cinematic way to be able to share the same message, but in a theatrical entertainment way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say that it almost sounds like it's you're going down like the Mark Romero route, who's been doing that for quite a few years now. I don't know if I know you trained with him early on with Dory Funk and everything, but yeah, it sounds sort of quite a similar thing. If you would give me your YouTube, your Twitter, your website, and anything else you would like to plug, and then I shall shut down the show.
Yeah, and I want to say real quick, Mark Merrill is a great guy. He's a great friend. We stay in touch. Same with Diamond Dallas Page. So I'm giving a shout out to those guys. Those guys are in the space of helping people with breakthroughs and bettering their lives physically, mentally, and spiritually. So that's the same space that what I've been doing and what I'm going to continue growing into. Okay. Twitter, Instagram is Dr. Shawn 008, DRSHAWN 008. Facebook's just Shawn Stasiak-Stippich. And of course, you can go to Pro Wrestling Tees. I got my phobia t-shirts are available. You should rock the pink one, man. It's breast cancer awareness in October. I lost my mom to breast cancer, so that's very near and dear to my heart. And so the phobia character rocks the pink in October, but check that out at Pro Wrestling Tees. Just put in Shawn Stasiak, go to my store, wear it with pride. And then also, my YouTube channel, which is Shawn Stasiak's World. It's brand new. Well, I've had some videos up there, James, for a while. I was explaining this to you, but I just kind of left it. And now I'm adding new content and plan to be consistent and just showcasing different aspects of my life that make up me.
I'll tell you what, is your producer giving you the wrap up, is she?
Sarah? Yes. Sorry. Are you asleep? We put her to sleep. Okay. How much time we got left?
Well, I have a coworker coming up to take over. Do you need more time?
How much time could you allot us the most?
We don't have anybody else coming in.
Okay. So, do we have another 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine.
5-10 minutes. We can keep going.
Which of the big stars would maybe take you under their wing, give you some advice? The Steve Austins, the Rocks, the Undertakers, and so forth, who would be generous with their time with you?
Man, I remember this really stands out because it was just awesome. Like Mark Calloway, the Undertaker, guys like Fit Finlay. Of course, he was an agent too, and that was part of his job description, is to help talent. Steve Regal at times. And, I guess sometimes The Rock or Steve Austin, just little stuff. I mean, everybody's always there to help everybody, for the most part. I mean, it's a dog eat dog world, and maybe they're giving bad advice. Yeah, do this, do that. Meanwhile, they're saying that's the shits, it's gonna make them look even worse. But I remember Undertaker coming to me and saying, let's go over some things in the ring, or maybe I came to him and asked him for his insight, on a couple things. And so he would take the time and went before the show would start and, get in the ring and just go over psychology. And I don't remember specifically what it was, but it was some, just some maneuvers, different wrestling moves, transitions. And I just thought that was so cool because he was so authentic and real. And here's the Undertaker, one of the biggest stars, in the business, and taking his time, with me. And I can see genuinely he was very genuine, very authentic, and you could tell he really cared. There's certain people you meet, James, and this from experience. You can, they say the eyes are the window to the soul, and you can just see someone who's legit and real. And I got that from Mark for sure. I felt that he genuinely wanted to help me improve and help me, when I did reach out to him.
I will. Do you know what? Actually, this is something I asked before, but it sort of got lost in the story, really. But Vince Russo was your first real meeting with WWF head honchos. I'm assuming it was it Vince McMahon or was it Vince Russo? In fact,
no, actually, trying to think. I mean, everything went through Vince because he was the head honcho, like you said. I just, from what I remember, I don't think I actually, and Vince Russo, yeah, I would consult with him and backstage and whatnot, but I think it was like the agents that were assigned to the match that would go over specifics in the match, and creatively, if I had questions or whatever, I could talk to Vince Russo. But I don't think my storyline or my character at the time really required a whole lot of time, honestly, because it was pretty basic and simple, and quite frankly, kind of stupid, looking back. I mean, it was kind of a goofy character, goofy gimmick, a couple of them that I played. But I think it was just really the agent at the time that was assigned, because they're getting the direct word from, I guess, Vince Russo, or coming from Vince McMahon. So that's all I can really say from what I remember of that.
With Vince Russo, are you with him WCW? He brought you in after you left WWF in 1999. We're both Jim Cornette guys, as we've said before, but Vince Russo, are you a Vince Russo guy as well? Because he also, did stick with you, and he really, he did pretty right by you, I think, in WCW as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Because when that thing happened with the whole tape recorder incident with WWE, I was, for a couple of months, I was very concerned about, because there was no viable company really to go to but WCW at the time. And so, it's a small community, people talk, and but it was Vince Russo. I knew I had a shot because I knew that I believe he liked me and saw my talent and wanted to give me that opportunity, because him and Ed Ferrara, I think Ed went over to WCW as well, worked with Vince Russo, and those are the guys that came up with the Meat character. But I knew I had a chance or a shot, I believe, with them being in the office. And so I think I heard the story. It was Terry Taylor who actually I stayed in touch with or something, and he put the word in for me, that I was available, and everyone had heard what happened, so they wanted to know the real story, and they got to talking to me, and I explained the story 1,000 times. And so they gave me a shot by having me come over to the WCW power plant. And that's where I met the likes of Shawn O'Hare, Mark Jindrak, Chuck Palumbo, Mike Sanders, Alan Funk, a few of the other guys, a guy named Reno, and Johnny the Bull. And so, I think they were just kind of testing me out to see. I felt in some ways I had been in the business for about 1.5 years at that point, including training. So I had still been, very new to the business. I think they were just saying, let's just see how he is. Let's test him out. So I was doing the Hindu squats and the workouts and all that for a couple of weeks with those guys. And I think they took a liking to me and kind of took me in, because they believed my story. They believed in me, and I had more experience than them coming in. So I think they were able to pull from some of my experience too. So it was a good fit, and then Paul Orndorff was there, Mr. Wonderful, God rest his soul. But I was a huge Mr. Wonderful fan growing up. And he took a liking to me as well. So, I just busted my ass in the power plant and essentially started all over again. And so they finally said, hey, yeah, let's do business. So I was in business again. And I was so grateful, man, so thankful to have that opportunity, especially with what had happened. And knowing in my heart, I meant no wrongful intent whatsoever with that, and it got me fired from my dream job. But to have that second chance, man, was just, I'll always be so grateful for it. And, at WCW, I ended up making more money, getting more TV time, won the World WCW Tag Team Championships 3 times, had way more fun, traveled the world. And, WWE is the only company I ever wanted to work for, but it's ironic how that worked out, where I end up being treated differently and better, really, with WCW. I wish I would have had that same treatment with WWE, because that's ultimately that's the only place I ever wanted to be.
I think a lot of people would have been in the same boat the last couple of years. So many people publicly asking for their release in WWE because they're not happy with how they got treated. Before I let you go, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this, because the only time I ever heard the story, it was something like 2006 I heard it. Who stole your bag in Germany? I think it was in 2002.
Well, that I'll never know. Until this day, I have no idea. It wasn't in Germany. It was actually at College Station, Texas.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was an awful experience. I don't know. I heard rumor that Curt Hennig took the bag and threw it in the garbage, or did something with it, took it back to Minneapolis with, I don't know, man. And I don't want to think that, because God rest Kurt's soul. I love Kurt. And I was, it's so ironic that I looked up to him. I met my dad and his dad were great friends, Larry the Axe Hennig. I met Kurt when he was a young, I think 19, 20-year-old. I was a younger kid then in Portland, Oregon, when those wrestlers would come through the territory. I worked with Kurt, in WCW with that cheesy moniker, stealing his gimmick basically. But I just have so much utmost respect for Curt Hennig, and to think that he might have been behind that was just heartbreaking. Please don't tell me that, and I never know. He never admitted anything. I mean, he said, no, I had nothing to do with it. Because everyone approached him on that. I had everything in that bag. That was a nightmare. Oh my God. I had probably $8,000 worth of valuables in there. And the reason why I had that with me is because on that wrestling loop before the one I was on that had my bag stolen, I had gone back to Boise, Idaho to visit some old friends and my college wrestling coach and his family. And I had just a camcorder and more tapes, me and tapes and tape recorders. In fact, I don't know, maybe I'm recording right now.
Well, I certainly am. I can guarantee you that at least.
Huh?
I certainly am. So I can guarantee you that at least.
So anyway, I don't know. I hope not. But that bag never got recovered. And I had ID, money, credit card. It was just a nightmare to go through that. I was after 9/11 too. And I had to travel from, I think, either flew out of Houston or Dallas back to Tampa, where I lived at the time. And it was just so weird to go back with my carry-on was missing. I had everything in there. So that was, I want to think that Kurt had nothing to do with it. That some scumbag at the airport stole it, and hopefully they got some value out of it.
Randy Orton said that he thought it may have been Kurt, but he didn't know he wasn't there. But was there any ribs that Curt Hennig did on you that you can definitely attribute to him?
No, I mean, other than just him acting up in the ring and making goofy faces at me when I'm trying to be serious. And he and I tagged together. We were actually in England, I believe, working against the Hardy Boys. And he was supposed to be on the ground selling. I was supposed to be over there concerned to help my partner up. And he's making these goofy faces. And I'm trying to not laugh. And he was just, nothing that really stands out other than him just being a clown and trying to make me laugh. And he said he loved my dad, and he grew up around my father too. My dad knew Kurt when he was just a little kid, when he'd probably go over to Larry's house or they'd travel together. He had little Curt Hennig running around, So I think there was that bond or mutual respect just for the second generation thing that existed between him and I.
Well, let's blame Randy Orton then, because he was quick to pass the blame on somebody else. Let's say he stole it.
Hey, and if that's true, that's a storyline in itself because he's the legend killer, and I'm all about embracing legends. I think him and I could make a lot of money. I'll be honest. I worked with Randy a little bit when he was a rookie, doing dark matches, and we had some good chemistry. Now I love Randy Orton. I follow him and always pulling for him, and I'm proud of what he's become. But yeah, I'm always open to the right business, James.
Well, there you go. I mean, there you go. That's a ready-made storyline. If you ever get back into the ring, then do you know what? I'm sure your producer's like tearing her hair out. Like, come on, I want to go home and everything. But I could talk to you. Like, look at these. I show these quite a lot. But look, I didn't ask you a quarter of the questions is written down there. So if at any point you want to do a part 2, I'd be more than pleased to have you on, man.
Yeah, we can do part 2. I'm sure eventually. Whatever. Josh. Are we how much time we got left? Over by a minute? Oh, we're over by 20 or 30 minutes.
Right then, so that's probably my cue for wrapping this up then. So I will thank you very much for watching. Sorry I was away for a couple of weeks. I had say actual work. This is my actual work as well, but I had my other job to do as well. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you, Shawn, as well, for joining us, and I hope to catch you next week.
Thank you for having me.